stopped since, and it's still going on. So tonight I'd like to present what's happening today. As you know, Pilgrim has shut down, but I will go through these slides, and hopefully you ask me any questions, and I'll hopefully be able to answer them for you. But thank you to the Salties for having me here. This is a great opportunity. So we're also sharing responsible stewardship. Our motto is do no harm. We should do no harm to our planet and the people. And then we must hold Holtec in order to meet those goals. I'm also part of Save Our Bay MA, a coalition that came together when we found out Holtec was dumping the water, planning to dump the radioactive water into the bay. It's a wide coalition of fishermen, real estate people, Native Americans. It's a great coalition, and maybe the Salties could join our coalition. That would be great. And League of Women Voters. Yeah. Okay, and I'm sure you've all seen this sign. Are you familiar with this? Because when we started, somebody said, you know, fishermen can't even throw a gum wrapper into the bay without getting fined. And we said, well, how can that be? Holtec is planning to dump radioactive water and chemicals into the bay with impunity. So we got to work. All right. So water is life, and isn't it the best place to be out on the water? You gotta love it. So our big question is, how do we protect our communities from this criminal action that Holtec is planning? So I'll start from the beginning. What's happening today? Well, Pilgrim was shut down in 2019, and Holtec Corporation bought it from Entergy Corporation. And when they did, our Attorney General said, this doesn't look right. They filed a petition against the sale. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is a federal regulator, said, you can buy it anyways, Holtec, it's yours, overriding our concerns by the Attorney General's office. That was settled in an agreement, and I'll get back on that. So Holtec owns Pilgrim. What they have to do is decommission it. They have to take the buildings down, they have to reduce the radioactivity to low levels, and that's what they're trying to do. When they bought Pilgrim for about $1,000, they also got a $1.2 billion decommissioning trust fund to do the work.
From the government?
No. Good question. Not from the government. Where did this money come from?
Ratepayers.
Yes, when Pilgrim opened in 1972 up till 1999, ratepayers, we all chipped in money for this reactor to be decommissioned safely. Okay? It's our money, it's ratepayer money that is the decommissioning trust fund. Entergy, Holtec, Boston Edison, previous owner, never put a penny into it. So the decommissioning trust fund is now $1.2 billion. When Holtec bought Pilgrim, they got the decommissioning trust fund, they got the nuclear waste, and they got the property for $1,000. So that gives Holtec an incentive to do decommissioning cheap and fast, and that's a big concern and a worry of ours. So today, Holtec has to get rid of that water that is in the spent fuel pool. Now this water is very different from the cooling water that circulated to cool the reactor when it was running. It's where those highly radioactive spent fuel assemblies were stored and cooled in that building. This the building, the square building here. That building was built to hold 880 assemblies originally, but because there was no place for this waste to go, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission kept giving amendments to the owners. They kept putting more in. When Pilgrim shut down, there were 3,800 fuel assemblies in a building that was supposed to hold 880. That gives you an indication of what the Nuclear Regulatory Commission does. It appeases the corporations to save them money, and that's what's happening today. So anyways, this is the most highly radioactive water around. I mean, can you imagine 42 years of high-level nuclear waste that would have been going underground for tens of thousands of years, but is not. This water was what cooled it. We also know that there were cracks in some of the assemblies. They had to put boron into the water to prevent criticality. And a couple of years before it shut down, we learned that it would take 4 of those 3,800 assemblies to cause a nuclear meltdown. That's the risk we were at. So they have to get rid of this water to take down the building in order to clean it up and move out fast, okay? What they want to do is dump it into Cape Cod Bay. They want to dump their garbage into our bay, and we're not letting that happen. So that's where we are. So we have two principles that we work on. The precautionary principle. And these are guidelines for making environmental decisions that should be employed. They're employed all through Europe. They should be employed here. Taking preventative action in the face of uncertainty, exploring a range of possibilities and their harmful effects, shifting the burden of proof to the proponents of the activity. Holtec, you tell us it's safe. And increasing public participation in decision making. It's our ratepayer money that's paying for all this, but we have no say in how it's being spent. That's not right. So we follow the precautionary principle in our group, and also ALARA. Has anybody heard of ALARA? Okay. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has a lot of acronyms. This stands for as low as reasonably achievable. And that means decisions made regarding disposal of radioactive materials needs to be in a method that is as low as reasonably achievable. That's a decision we make as people, you know? So Holtec is making a decision not based on this principle. And it is, in fact, a regulation of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But once again, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission does not hold up safety measures for the public. It's cheaper for Holtec to dump in the bay than to use a more environmentally responsible method. Also, too, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission recognizes that any exposure to radiation poses some health risk. The National Academy of Sciences completed a study, the BEER-7 report, the biological effects of ionizing radiation, and found there's no safe dose, no safe level of radiation that could do no harm. None, zero. So we're saying zero radiation into our environment. Okay, and why are we concerned? Just a quick, radionuclides cause cancer, heart disease, birth defects, DNA damage. It doesn't take a lot for that to happen, but this report talks about all of the damage to the human body that radionuclides have an impact on. And also too, as fishermen and lovers of the sea, not only will it damage the DA in humans, but also the marine animals, okay? And we have that beautiful right whale in Cape Cod Bay. What are there, 365 of them left? Their DNA can be damaged too. It's criminal, okay. All right, and so when we're looking at what is in that water, we do know one of the components is tritium, and tritium mimics water. So it gets into the water, and it gets into, it would just flow in the bay. Holtec will say, oh, it's not dangerous, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. But what they don't talk about is organically bound tritium too. So there's two kinds of tritium. Tritiated water that spreads around, it can become an aerosol in the beach and come up in sea spray onto the beach where our children play. It can go inland with the wind. And then organically bound tritium is it gets into the sediment, and then it's uptake in grasses and the small fish. And it moves up and bioaccumulates in orders of magnitude up the food chain onto our plate. And that's serious, but they won't discuss this part. All right, so any questions on this so far? Good, okay, yes.
The cooling water, how does it get contaminated? I mean, it's not supposed to be a direct contact with nuclear materials.
Okay, the question is about the cooling water, yes.
So it must have been cracked or something?
That was separate.
Okay, you're talking about the cooling water that cooled the reactor when it was operating?
Yeah.
This is a spent fuel pool water, so when every 2.5 years, they would have to change those assemblies and bring in new ones. When they put the assemblies in, they were irradiated with uranium. When they pull them out, they're highly irradiated. And they take them out and they put them in the pool to cool down. And so that's the water we're talking about that held all of these highly radioactive assemblies. So the cooling water is something different when the reactor was operating.
So this is like, they're cleaning up the...
Yeah, they have to take that building down.
Diane, can you shout the questions back at
Yep.
us in the back?
Yes, okay. Yes, that was about the cooling water versus the spent fuel pool water.
Thank you.
Okay, yes.
One of the solutions Holtec discussed or talked about was evaporation. what happens to tritium if they evaporate for long?
Okay. What happens, one of the legal methods of getting rid of the water is evaporation. If you evaporate the water, the tritium evaporates with it, gets into the clouds, comes back down as rain. Evaporation is not a good solution, but it's one of the legal ones. And again, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has approved that. Yes, yes?
What will happen with the fuel rods? Don't they have to be disposed of before they get rid of the water?
The fuel rod, what happens with the fuel rods that are in the water? The fuel rods have already been removed from the water. They've been put into what's called dry casks. They're stainless steel cans, and I wish I had my Yeti coffee cup, because if you have a coffee cup and you look at your coffee cup, the stainless steel cans are a 1/2 inch stainless steel thick, just a little bit more than a coffee cup. That's where those assemblies are. Those assemblies are generally supposed to be kept in the pool for 5 to 7 years, but Holtec wants to get out of here quick. The faster they get out, the more money they make. So they got an exemption from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to take these hot assemblies and put them in the cans. And those cans are then a concrete cast put over them. And they're sitting on a hill in Plymouth. You can drive by on Rocky Hill Road and see them. And they will be there for decades to come, because there's no place for them to go. No.
I thought Utah, isn't there a mountain in Utah?
Yeah, there was a question about Yucca Mountain. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Yucca Mountain was designated as a repository, but that was a political move in order for nuclear power industry to continue operating and making nuclear waste. They had to have a plan in place to take care of the waste in order for this industry to keep going. Alison McFarland is the former chairwoman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. She was a geologist. She graduated from MIT, and she, as a chairwoman, she said, you need a stable and dry environment to hold this stuff for tens of thousands of years, and Yucca Mountain is neither. So there is no place to put this waste. They know the government has no idea what to do with it. Yes?
Yeah, I have a quick question, because we've used the term quite a few times, and I don't understand it, because it sounds like nothing's happened yet. We've said this is criminal, back from '83, this is criminal, it's illegal, and I agree. I mean, having read this, it sounds like it would be illegal if they proceeded without permits. Isn't that the problem?
Absolutely, and I will get to that. Absolutely, that's the problem.
We're yelling about Holtec trying to do it as cheaply as possible, but
Yes.
any of us in any of our business would do it as cheaply as possible, as long as we're meeting the letter and maybe even the spirit of the law.
Right.
So where's the criminality?
I will get to that.
Criminality would be with our regulators.
Right, exactly.
There's no criminality yet, right? I mean, they haven't done a thing.
Well, there is if they do.
As far as we know, and I'll get into that, and I'll tell you why I suggest that. I don't know, but I'll get into that. That's at the end of the slides.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
What is
Yep.
the timeline on this? When are they supposed to take action to complete this disposal?
Of the water?
Yeah.
What's the timeline for the disposal of the water?
Yeah.
Holtec has 60 years to decommission the nuclear reactor, according to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, so they have time. They could leave it there for a while. They could figure out something else. So they're not, it's just, time is money to Holtec. And the sooner they get it done, the sooner they get that property back on the market, and they leave with the decommissioning trust fund, that's what they're doing.
Did you say 6 years?
Yeah, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has given 60 years to decommission a nuclear power plant. So Entergy was going to leave it there for 60 years and let the water decay, so it would be safer to do something with it, but Holtec wants to get it out of there fast.
So what's their plan? How fast are they planning to get it out?
Okay, I'll get into that. I will get into more about the Holtec plan, okay? All right, can I move on? Is that all right? Okay, okay, all right, okay. So, when you're talking about management of waste that contains tritium, and every nuclear reactor wastewater has tritium in it, the International Atomic Energy Agency says you can't put it in water. You need to keep it out of the environment. Okay, all right, so I'm going to go on to what's happening in the Bay. Dr. Irina Rapina is a oceanographer. She's a PhD at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. And we asked her to take a look at what was going on, so she completed a study. And she found, and it shouldn't be any surprise to any of you folks, right? But what she found is if the release of the plume would go down into Cape Cod Bay and swirl around. Get in the sediment and swirl around. Another part of it would hit around Race Point and then hug all along the coast on the outer cape.
Kill the seals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. So she's a part of the water originating is likely to flow in the bay and Race Point and then outer beaches. So I don't know if any of you have been reading Christine Legier. She used to work for the Cape Cod Times and now she works for the Providence Independent. I would highly recommend. Provincetown, sorry. Provincetown, thank you. Provincetown Independent. She's phenomenal. She has done her deep research, so I would recommend Google Christine Legier. But these are some of the articles that she's written lately. You know, the shape of the bay means the poisons will linger in the bay, and it will likely end up in the sediment on the ocean floor, on the beaches, inside the bay. In harm's way, radioactive water from Pilgrim would flow to the outer cape. Others, it would be associated with marine sediments like cobalt-60, and others would accumulate in the marine biota. Usually cesium isotopes and strontium-90 are of concern. And strontium-90 gets into your bones, and mimics calcium, and cesium gets into your muscles. And then the plume would, again, hit the outer cape. And again, they talk about the accumulation of the radionuclides in the sediment, and then it would move up the food chain.
Can you keep yelling at me back here, because I'm dense?
Okay,
You
all right,
can
so,
laugh,
okay, yes. So anyways, here's what would happen in 2 weeks. Right up here is Pilgrim, and you see this is day 1, day 3, day 5, really kind of swirling around the Dennis Brewster area. Day 10 and day 15, and it lingers in the bay. All those lovely Wellfleet oysters. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does any of the positive chemicals settle? Has anybody done a study as to what degree the past action has already accumulated in those areas?
No. No. Only in Plymouth, and only in 1988.
That was the one year that
Everybody
Oh,
knows.
I'm sorry. Has anybody done a study of the accumulation in the bay? No. No, they haven't. In fact,
Has there been any to date with the question?
yes. And no, in fact, the last study done on cancer and radionuclides in the public was in 1999, I think. Dr. Richard Clapp, who was the head of the cancer registry in Boston and was with the BU Medical School of Public Health, completed a study around Pilgrim and found that the closer you lived or worked to Pilgrim, the incidence of leukemia increased 4-fold. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission was going to commission 3 studies a couple of years, maybe 10 years ago. They actually even had some funds available to do a study and then canceled it at the last minute. The government doesn't want us to know.
Are they being paid off, you know,
Who?
NRC?
Is the NRC being paid off?
Yeah, question.
Look at what they do and don't do.
So we don't have any clue as to what the positive settlement has been in that area. And given past history, and now with the future history, we're gonna add to that and still not know.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And that's one thing we can request from our elected officials is to commission a study to look at the sediments in the bay
Right.
and what's there now. Yeah, that's a really good action. Yeah, thank you.
Environmental
Yes.
impact, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I think one thing people can be reminded of is when the Hooksett treatment plant in New Hampshire. Do you remember all the little discs, the pollution plant discs that showed up on the shoreline? are round little mesh discs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that gives you a good indication what the currents and the deposits are from finding all those discs. It's,
Right, right.
you know, it really doesn't stay in their own neighborhood.
It moves around,
I
yeah.
still find them occasionally.
Oh, wow,
And
wow.
it's been years.
Right, right. And so this is, she
Folks,
published,
Can we let Diane go through with her presentation, and she'll stay and answer all the questions you have, but let's let her get her presentation done.
and that's exactly what's happening here, you can see. So, and so she published her study with Dr. Ken Busler too, who's done a lot of work at Fukushima. And so I would recommend you look at this piece. And it said local retention in sea floor sediments and higher rates of uptake by marine organisms would be of greater concern for potential human health effects. Okay, so Holtec owns Pilgrim. Holtec is an international company that has so much money that they can run roughshod over communities and get away with it. They're doing that in New Mexico, they're doing that at Oyster Creek. In fact, in Oyster Creek in New Jersey at their reactor, they dumped water from their spent fuel pool into Barnegat Bay while oyster farmers were seeding their areas
Right.
and did not tell them. They're planning to dump, they bought Indian Point on the Hudson River just north of New York City. They're planning to dump that water, which is drinking water, for 100,000 people. And the Environmental Protection Agency has said the maximum contaminant level for radionuclides in drinking water should be 0. Yeah, so Holtec, it's illegal. It's illegal what they're doing, and I will get into that. Okay. One problem is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is responsible for radionuclides, and they've already given Holtec the green light to dump. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission says, you can dump, keep your records, and let us know later what you did. No regulation concern, NRC, okay?
Protecting people in the environment.
Yeah, yeah, protecting people in the environment, no. So anyways, and then the NRC will look at it at a later date. So there's no accountability by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is pretty criminal. However, the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and the Mass Department of Environmental Protection have regulations that prohibit the dumping. EPA has regulations that prohibit the dumping of the chemicals that are in that water too. It's not just radionuclides, but it's also a lot of chemical mix in there. And they say you can't dump that water. The Department of Environmental Protection in the state of Massachusetts has the same kind of permit. And they say you can't dump in the water. And that permit is, it's the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. NPDES for short, okay? I know, these words. Anyways, they have this permit that says they cannot dump spent fuel pool water, period, end of subject. In order to dump the water, they must apply and obtain a new or modified NPDES permit, and that's where we're at today. Holtec says, no we don't.
Don't trust Holtec.
No, we don't. That's what they say. I'll get more into that. Okay, and now, and our legislators, and we have, we're so excited to have Senator Sue Moran here. Our legislators can pass bills to prohibit dumping, and Sue has done a Herculean job of trying to get legislation to halt Holtec. So Sue, yeah.
I'll just be a minute. Thank you, Diane. The reason I have said not one drop in Cape Cod Bay and filed legislation for that purpose is because of Diane and other advocates. And I want to thank the Salties for bringing this group together. It's huge. It's sportsman fishing. It's our children. I see a couple of kids who have come in, and I know your son would probably like to be here. It is our next generation that we're concerned about. And with me, I'm the senator for Plymouth. I live in Falmouth. I have 4 towns on each side of the bay. I straddle the canal, essentially. with me is Senator Sear, who is a senator for the lower part of the Cape. Someone asked me about Representative Sarah Peak, also with us, and we're bringing in legislators from the Plymouth side of the bridge as well. I have held about every 6 weeks updating meetings to bring all of the legislative community together. And Diane has done a terrific job of continuing the support and, frankly, the pressure to keep this top of desk, top of mind for also the federal delegation, to the extent that Senator Markey actually had one of the second in his committees field hearing, and he held it in Plymouth, where Holtec is sitting right now in our area, and put the NRC in the hot seat and suggested, and Diane was there, that there needs to be better watchdog here. So we are continuing the fight. My bill, which would look at what is proposed, the idea of the dumping, how it affects our food, our health, our tourism economy, went through the Senate. It went through the House. Unfortunately, the governor did not sign it. And so we are at the point where we're going to bring it back. We're optimistic with the Attorney General, now as the governor, who has negotiated and really been a continuing watchdog on these efforts. We're optimistic that that will pass, and I am taking notes about other pieces of legislation that are suggested by you that may also be helpful. So I have a huge amount of gratitude for the length of time. Diane has been doing this over 20 years, has an incredible, just not only institutional history, but really understands the chemistry. And Senator Markey's office, along with Congressman Keating and Senator Warren, that we're all together and trying to put the spotlight on what Holtec is doing, and to be sure that we are going to have our base safe and our next generation safe. So thank you all for, this is standing room only. It's incredibly impressive. Thank you, Salties, and all the other organizations.
Thank you, Senator Moran, for your leadership.
Thank you very much for being here. You referenced a piece of legislation. What was the name of that legislation?
Oh, goodness, it's totally new.
Okay.
What I'll tell you is, we'll put it, what my address is on the State House website. You'll see it being filed again, and we'll contact you directly about what that is, so folks can support it and write to other legislators. I'll take your material as I go.
Right, so practical question. Is it helpful for organizations like this community organization to write letters in support of that legislation and to contact other officials in the state?
Yeah, it's hugely helpful. Not only your own senator, obviously Senator Jim or myself, but the other senators. This is a concern for all of Massachusetts, and we need everyone's vote to move it forward. So we're filing over the next couple of weeks. We will get you those numbers.
So question for the Salties members, is there a motion to use our talents and our resources to write communications in support of that legislation? And
Yes.
we
We should work on a petition.
well, yeah, so the Salties, is there a motion to write a communication in support of the reference legislation and our own petition to the Massachusetts legislators?
Yes, yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, all the updated legislation is in process right now. So that's why I mentioned last year too was H444 that would have codified the Massachusetts Oil and Hazardous Materials and Release and Prevention Act, which makes dumping radionuclides into any body of water illegal, and that's a state law. So we are asking that that be refiled. But we will be putting that up on our website. We are in touch with the legislators, and like Senator Moran said, it's all in process now. Their filing date is January 20th. so we really won't get any numbers and links for you to contact until after next week. But go to saveourbayma.com or capedownwinders.info, and we will have that information listed there. But the state can enforce the laws and the regulations to prohibit dumping, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay, so you have your illegal sheet. My glasses on here, and so I wanted to just take a minute to look at this because it is illegal. Like I said, the Environmental Protection Agency, under the Clean Water Act, prohibits the discharge of chemical pollutants in the water of the United States. Holtec's current permit does not allow them to dump the spent fuel pool water. However, Holtec says they don't agree with the EPA's interpretation of their own regulations. It's true. There are letters on the table that I brought in that are from the EPA that I usually send people to links, but this stuff is important to highlight, hold on, and use. So make sure you take one of each before you leave. So the first one is the Clean Water Act, and they clearly have written to Holtec that says you are not authorized, you are prohibited from dumping the water, and in order to move forward, you must apply for a new or modified NPDES permit. So that was, they first said this, I think it was in January. Guess what's happening today? How many of you think they've started to apply any application in? January, a year later, they still have not put in an application. Okay, the next thing is the settlement agreement. When Holtec purchased Pilgrim, the Attorney General intervened. And in that settlement agreement, she got Holtec, yes, she got Holtec to agree to abide by state laws and regulations. Right there, we've got them, okay? So they are legally bound to abide by state laws and regulations. And what do?
Ignore them.
Yep. So dumping is still on Holtec's table. So one of those regulations is the Massachusetts Protected Ocean Sanctuary Act, and as you all know, Cape Cod Bay is a protected ocean sanctuary, and you can't dump radionuclides into that bay or chemicals that are prohibited by the EPA and the Department of Environmental Protection in the state of Massachusetts. And yet Holtec says water dumping is still our plan. And the last one is that Massachusetts has the authority to stop it based on these federal and state laws and the settlement agreement. Okay, so we're really needing to push our state people to take action to prevent this dumping. And so on the second page is, so you say, well, it's illegal to dump. They don't need to choose, they don't need to dump. There's other options that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has given them permission to use. None of them are good, okay? Shipping the water to a licensed off-site facility. That's what Vermont Yankee has done. Vermont Yankee had an agreement with the owner of their nuclear reactor on the Connecticut River to not dump in the Connecticut River, so they don't. What they have done is they take that water and they truck it to a facility that puts it in containers with a clay kind of mixture, solidifies it, and then they put it in containers and keep it out of the environment. And that's what they're doing there. They could evaporate the water again. That's something that they could do legally by the NRC. Unfortunately, the tritium, as was brought up before, would go up into the environment, into the clouds, and come back down in rain and contaminate the area. And the last one is storing on site. The way they could store on site is to keep it in the pool, like Entergy was originally going to do. But you know that big problem. Holtec wouldn't be able to take down the building, they wouldn't be able to leave, it would cost them money, and that's a problem for Holtec. So those are the options, those are the legal options. So Holtec does not need to dump in the bay, okay? And we also know from the flyer that the Cape Cod Bay is semi-enclosed and it will be trapped, okay? Tritium can't be filtered out of the water and it will be going into the sediment and into the fish. And then our blue economy, when you look at what would happen with the shellfish industry, the fishing industry, lobstering, tourism, our blue economy would be seriously damaged if people see Cape Cod Bay as radioactively contaminated. That's a bad thing, and it doesn't have to happen. Okay, so, as Senator Moran said, Senator Markey's been really on this. He's really on Holtec. He's doing a great job. And he did have that special Senate hearing on May, let me see, it was May 6th of this year. And he invited Holtec CEO Chris Singh to represent the corporation. I have to show you this tape. Listen carefully what Chris Singh says to the question, in response, okay? Oh, shoot, it didn't go. Oh, it didn't go, shoot. Ugh.
Maybe you can just tell us what to look up on it.
Oh, but if you hear him say it,
Yeah.
he said, I don't speak in verbal acrobatics. And Senator Markey says, what? And he said, I don't speak in verbal acrobatics. What we said is we will not dump contaminated anything. And I also said the water is not contaminated. That's the CEO of Holtec, saying that to Senator Markey.
Said the water is not contaminated?
What we said was, we will not dump contaminated water. We will not dump contaminated anything. And I also said, the water's not contaminated. You'll see. Holtec has said you could drink the water, it's so good. Again, okay, and does this remind you of something?
Sing song.
You remember that old tobacco industry? You know, have a smoke, it's good for you. It's the same thing.
Was for a while.
Yeah, yeah. So, and this is a lot of words, I didn't want you to have to read it, but I'm just gonna explain what it is. This is the back and forth word game that Holtec is doing with the Environmental Protection Agency, with Senator Markey, and with us. And we don't fall for it. Senator Markey, Senator Warren, and Representative Keating told Holtec on January 12, 2022, you're not dumping in the bay. On February 17, 2022, the EPA said, any such discharge is strictly prohibited, right to Holtec. So you think they say, okay, all right, let's back off and file for a permit or do something else. What does Holtec say? It is within the plain language of the NIPD's permit and is consistent with the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding and past discharges. They're saying we're doing it. June 17th, the EPA said, Holtec is not authorized under the current permit to discharge pollutants in the spent fuel pool water. July 7th, EPA tells them again, you cannot, because Holtec said that they could discharge treated water, that it complies with the permit, EPA had to tell them again, no it doesn't and you can't dump. November 17th, Holtec says, we expect to be using treated water release as part of our plan. November 28th, Holtec, David Noyes, the senior compliance manager of Holtec, said the company believes it is already legally allowed to dump the water. When asked if there would be no discharge prior to the resolution of the permit issue, he said, I can't say that. December 5th, the EPA again tells Holtec they are not authorized under the current NIPD's permit to discharge the water. This is almost a whole year now of this back and forth. And then on December, Holtec said all the water volumes will be independently processed and then combined for a single water volume for final processing treatment prior to discharge. What don't they get?
No.
What don't they get?
Excuse me, can I ask a
Yep.
question? What would happen if they did it anyway?
Okay, so that was the first thing I looked up when I.
What was the question?
I'm sorry, what would happen if they did it anyways? Okay, so we looked up what is the fine? Okay, so we found out that transporting the water to a licensed facility would cost about $20 million, which is 4% of their profit from the Decommissioning Trust Fund. So we found at $20 million. The fine for dumping would be $60,000 a day. They'll take a day, every day that they're dumping, it will be $60,000. So they'll be willing to take the hit. They're willing to take the hit. Okay, I'm glad you asked that one. What about lawsuits? Well, that's what we're asking the Attorney General to look into in violation of the laws. But you do know that wonderful Andrew Gottlieb with the Association to Preserve Cape Cod is getting some background stuff done, ready for a lawsuit against Holtec. So they're working in the background, we don't know where they're at, but they have announced that they are considering a lawsuit.
Can't they just be fired?
Hmm?
Can't they just be fired?
Can't they just be fired?
Yeah.
They own Pilgrim.
You're fired.
They own Pilgrim, yeah. So the EPA is trying to, yes?
Does the NRC, authority in this case, supersede the state and the Environmental Protection Agency? It seems like that's where the problem is coming from. You know, they can claim, Holtec's claiming, the NRC says we can do it. So you've just gotta get to the NRC, right? I mean,
Okay.
Is that the problem?
Okay, so the question was, is the NRC the problem because Holtec says the NRC has given us permission and it's good to go with the NRC? The issue is, with the settlement agreement with the Attorney General, Holtec is bound to Massachusetts laws. And that knocks the NRC out.
Well, then you got
Yep. And plus, the EPA is looking at the chemical contaminants there too, and that's still a big issue. Yes?
What about criminal implications?
What about criminal implications? You know, the Massachusetts Oil and Hazardous Materials Prevention and Relief Act has a section that says the threat of dumping is illegal. And again, that's why we need the Attorney General to move on this now. Yes.
Initially, did this go out on an RFP? And were there any other
No.
bidders, or they were the only ones?
Oh, I hope this video goes. I don't know why the videos aren't going. Oh, good. Okay, here's Jim Lambert. Can't hear him.
Yeah, your computer's not plugged into the speaker.
Oh, I don't know what. No, can't hear him. Shoot. You know why the volume? Oh, shoot.
Is there a microphone?
No, the town doesn't have it in here tonight.
Oh, I didn't know that, okay.
For the presentation?
No, there's no microphone over there.
Okay, so this is, so that's the Holtec, David Noyes, the compliance manager. I just laugh every time I think of that title for him. That was Jim Lambert. He's a member of the Save Our Bay, and he asked David Noyes, will you comply with the EPA requirement to not dump? And he says, no, it's something we can do and we're doing it. I wish you could hear him. We'll get this up on our website, but it's really powerful to hear somebody ask a question and get those kinds of answers. All right, done. And here he is again. Now, Andrew Gottlieb said, will there be no discharge? So this was November 28th. Will there be no discharge prior to resolution of the permit issue? And he answers, I can't answer that.
Prior to the resolution of the permit issue. I can't say that.
I can't say that. Yeah. No, that's November 28th.
So they could be doing it right now.
Yes. And I'll tell you why
Have
I
they
think
been
they are.
doing it?
Please. Okay, they could be doing it right now. And what you're seeing too is the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel. These meetings are held every other month in Plymouth at the Town Hall. And that's one thing I would ask everybody to go to. The next one is January 23rd, a Monday. It's so important because Holtec is on the panel and you can ask them questions. The press is there, it gets recorded, and these are people from the state, from the town, and it's a very important, it's a platform to speak out. Okay, so, we're looking at Holtec, okay? Holtec is about the money. The Decommissioning Trust Fund, they want to leave town with that money. Doesn't matter what they do. They'll dump in our bay. They'll contaminate our waters. They'll put our kids at risk for $1, okay? This quote, Holtec, a company with an extremely questionable history and extremely questionable present, as reflected in various misrepresentations alleged herein, that is from a lawsuit by the New Mexican Attorney General against the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and naming Holtec for misrepresentation and illegal activities. So what they're doing is not something new, it's what they do. It's part of their business plan, okay? So it's cheaper for Holtec to violate the laws and pay a fine rather than implement an environmentally responsible plan.
Diane, who sets those fines?
The EPA.
So can't the EPA raise those fines?
Who sets the fines? The EPA does. I would think they could, but that's what's on the books now.
So I'm just saying, if those fines get to the point where it's gonna be greater than $20 million, is it in their best interest to start shipping it?
It would be in their best interest to do something other than dumping in the bay. Anything, right. Also jail time, so I'll get to that too, because the last letter, it's up there. The last letter the EPA wrote was December 5th, I think, to Holtec, warning them, you dump, you're looking at fines, you're looking at jail time. But they knew that before anyway, so I don't know. Yes, yes.
Do you have the Endangered Species Act in your favor, right?
Yes, yes,
And we have a serious problem here with whales.
yes.
Can they get involved in the legal fining issue as a separate entity as opposed to also include their weight in this situation?
Yes, we're looking at the Endangered Species Act. Somebody has filed on, the tern, I think, but the right whale,
Right.
and there's a few others. So we're looking at perhaps doing that, that's on our
Okay.
agenda. Thank you. Okay. All right, so anyways, we have Governor Maura Healey. She's already come out and said that she expects Holtec to abide by the rules in the Attorney General's agreement. She also said that she will hold Holtec to their agreements, and that is to follow state regulations. And that one was recent. Okay, so what can you do to halt Holtec? Well, we're asking that you contact Governor Healey to stay engaged and to be ready to sign any legislation that's coming down the pike, like Sue Moran's. These have to be emergency bills, because what we know today is Holtec has not applied for a new permit, and the permit process could take up to a year. They don't want that. So they have not applied for a permit. Number two, in order to get the permit, they need to get water samples from the spent fuel pool so we know what's in it. We still don't know what's in it, number one. And number two, they knew in January of last year that they were gonna they should be applying for a new permit, that they would need samples of the water would need to be analyzed. Do you think we have any samples? Has the state taken any samples of the water? No. So you put that together, it's been a year. No samples of the water, no permit application. And we're concerned that they're dumping.
Why no samples? Why haven't they taken samples?
They just haven't.
What was the question?
Why haven't they taken samples? Because Holtec has to let the state in to take the samples, and they have not arranged that, they just haven't done it. Yep. And I think they don't want to do it. Right. And I also wonder too, is if they don't want the state to go in there because the water levels are already down, because they're dumping. Who knows? We don't know. Yes?
What is the nature of the treatment that supposedly is being offered on this water?
They're supposed to be able to filter out some of the pollutants, some of the chemicals, some of the radionuclides, but not all of them. And the permit says it has to be 100% clean. But Chris Singh says it's so clean you could drink it. It's cleaner than Plymouth Bay right now.
Nobody drinks that.
Right, I know, nobody drinks that. Yes?
Well, if my memory serves me correctly, down south, they have the same problem, but they had a big filtration plant put in, and the top is all messy, and in the bottom, you got guys catching huge trout because the water is so clean. It's like an aquarium. How many have a fishing aquarium? A tropical fish aquarium. That's what it does. The environment, it's like it filters everything down, all the leaves and everything. It filters everything down, because in the deep woods, you'll find the cleanest water you've ever seen. It's clean because you're taking everything off the environment that needs to be there.
Right, and
I
filtered
think
water
these
can be
guys
clean.
I think these guys that are pissing and moaning about, oh, don't do this, don't do that. Send them to the shower for a little while with the water that they say is perfectly good, and wait till they wake up with a rash and everything, because that's what they get.
Right. Well, I think we could all agree, you're right, I think we could all agree filtered water would be much cleaner. But we're talking about spent fuel pool water that held the most dangerous substance known to humankind in it. And there aren't filters for tritium, they cannot filter that out. There's other radionuclides in the water that they can't filter out. So that's our big concern. So there are waters that can be filtered, not this stuff. Some of it can be filtered, but not 100%. Yes, yes?
So what did the entity that granted them the $1.2 billion trust fund?
That was part of the purchase of the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant.
Where did the $1.2 billion come from? Who gave it? The trust fund.
Okay, that was, the Nuclear Trust Fund came from ratepayers from 1972 to 1999 when the industry became deregulated. That's when Entergy bought it, stopped the funds coming in, but they put it on the they put it in the stock market with Mellon Bank, and it built up from there.
Were there any kind of restrictions on what that money can be used for?
Yes, there are restrictions. It was meant just for decommissioning only, but in the best tradition of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the industry applies for exemptions. So now they can use that money for items that it wasn't meant to use, like dry cask storage, for taxes, for legal fees. And the thing with the dry casks and the waste storage, we get double dipped. I'll take it just a side note, this is a double dip. The Department of Energy promised to take away all this waste in 1999. Yucca Mountain was supposed to open, they were going to take everything. Well, because they didn't take that, it kind of broke the contract that they had with the industry to take the waste. So now what they do is the industry puts the waste in these cheap cans, and then they sue the DOE for the money it costs them to move the waste and put them in cans. And then instead of, okay, so then they get that money. But now the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has given them permission to use the Decommissioning Trust Fund to move the waste. And then they sue the DOE anyways. So they double dip. They get our taxpayer money and they get our ratepayer money. It's just a big scam. Yeah. And we're all unsafe by it. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Physically, what does it look like to have them dumping that water? How, is it a big tank that they will let it run out in the middle of the night? Do we have any way of
Monitoring.
looking, you know, controlling this, or, because why aren't they just doing it?
Right. Right now, they're not, well, they could be dumping some. Right now, they're using that water as they break apart the radioactive components. They're using the water for shielding. So it's getting even more radioactive. But they're using the water now. Yes.
Diane, keep speaking up.
I'm sorry.
Keep
Yes.
shouting at me. And do you have more territory you need to cover in the presentation?
I'll just wrap this up and then I'll take more questions. Is that okay? Okay. So we're asking you to contact Attorney General Andrea Campbell to enforce these laws. And then contact your state senator and representative to act on emergency legislation to prevent dumping. And again, we won't know those numbers in the legislation for another week. But also too, come to the next Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel. We have a rally ahead of time, a lot of folks out there with signs, and then we go in and we speak our mind, we ask questions, and like I said, you can hold Holtec's feet to the fire at that public meeting. It's really important. So we need you all, you know, to join in and stand up to save our bay, because it's our precious resource. We want it for our children, and that's why we're all here. Excuse me?
Did you say the date of the next?
Yes.
It's on the screen.
The next meeting is, it's the January 23rd. It's on a Monday.
Where and what time?
It's 6:30 Town Hall, Plymouth Center.
It's on
Yeah.
the screen.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. And it will be on our website too. We have the posters up there. But Monday, January 23rd, Plymouth Town Hall, in the Great Hall, at 6:30. But come early for our rally. We have speakers. The press usually shows up. They've been really great covering this issue and keeping it alive.
Popcorn?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, yes.
Years ago, back when Homeland Security started, the local harbor master offices, they were given grants to get Homeland Security cameras. And they're very strong cameras, they scan the waterfront in great detail. Not a lot of people know about them, but I would imagine Homeland Security probably had these HD cameras. There's probably some along the waterfront. Who is keeping track? Who is keeping an eye? And are these resources, I thought maybe the senator might be able to look that information up. Are there these HD cameras that can monitor the waterfront? So if somebody's dumping it, we might actually be able to know.
No, actually, so people, is the waterfront being monitored? No. We've been talking about going out in the water and collecting our own samples and holding on to them. Yeah, but no, there's no monitoring.
But quite often these cameras are being used and people don't really know it unless you work for the harbor master's office.
I'll just do a side. The security is a whole big issue there. I've been on the property, in front of the security cameras, over the red line, deadly shooting area, waving, looking for security. No security. I mean, I don't know now, and I'm not telling you to do that. But previously, going on the property was not a...
like people's security, not the nuclear private security. Like, is there Homeland Security cameras anywhere?
I'm sure there are some around the dry casts.
But
But
along the waterfront, you know, it's worth looking into, and it's worth inquiring.
Yes, yes, yes.
Over 20 years ago, I was out fishing with a friend of mine on the Andy Lynn boats. And we decided, after a poor day of cod fishing, we'd come in and try some flounder in front of the power plant. And we caught flounder, and they were all sick. Nobody kept them. And to this day, you know, I asked the captain, I said, you know, is somebody trying to address this someplace? I said, because it needs to be addressed. So as a concerned citizen, I want to thank you personally for your efforts, because your efforts are making a big difference. And hopefully involved a little bit more than it is, because that's what it needs. We need not only the senators, we need the representatives, and we need all of the legal aspect to resolve this problem, and it can't be just on one or two small groups, no offense, pushing this all the time, because we have enough legal aspects in the United States to resolve this problem. And when somebody tells me I'm defying the laws, they should be arrested. There should be somebody right there and grab them by the collar and say, you don't, guess what? Say it one more time. We're going to put you in jail for a while.
Right.
That's what needs to be done.
Right.
Thank you.
Is the medical community involved?
What was that statement?
Is the medical community involved? They've always been involved. Actually, Dr. Potman, who's the chair of the Plymouth Board of Health, has spoken out, and they have written a letter saying no dumping in our bay, and we actually have a video podcast of his program where he talks about, he was a radiologist. No, he wasn't a radiologist. He worked...
Oncology?
Yeah.
Oncology.
I can't remember his exact title, but he provided an excellent program talking about radionuclides, ionizing radiation, and that this should not happen. It's a public health threat.
If you support Diane's efforts, stand up if you're going to be in Plymouth January 23rd, Monday. You've got to be kidding me. There's got to be more than that that are going to be there.
Take a bow, take a bow.
Hey, Ryan, thank you. Are you going?
Oh, yeah.
I'm going.
All right. I'll
And
give you a ride.
We will have a link on our website that will be for carpooling. So if people want to carpool, you can sign up on this carpool form and catch a ride too.
Is there a Zoom?
Yes, and also too, if you can't make it, there will be a Zoom link so you can watch it and you can actually call in. That will be on our website too. Yes.
Is
Is there someone from Plymouth now that takes water samples in front of that power plant that is not part of Holtec and not part of Plymouth?
Well, that's what we're talking about. We've been talking about that in the group of going and
Are they
grabbing some.
doing it or not?
No one is that I know
Diane,
of.
how
but we-
close to the power plant can you get? Because I know as a fisherman, for the longest time, you couldn't get anywhere close to that.
Yeah.
It sounds like security's off right now. I imagine you can get right there. But, I mean, all this, you're not gonna find a user group that's not in support of shutting Holtec down. You're not gonna find one user group. So we're all in agreement there, right? Across the entire Commonwealth, probably throughout New England, there's no user group that's gonna stand with Holtec. That being said, until they dump, until you have confirmation of dumping, everything else is just rhetoric. You can't do anything about it. You can say you're gonna sue them, Carl, but after the dumping's done, the damage is done. You sue them, they're gonna tie you up in litigation for years and years and years, but the damage is done. So unless you're monitoring that right off that coast, and if they have no security, you gotta monitor within 100 yards of shore.
Right.
But until then, unless the punishment is bigger than what it's going to be, and immediate, it doesn't mean anything.
They have no incentive.
They have
Right.
no incentive.
Right, right.
Are there any other nuclear plants where they've been involved in decommissioning?
Yes.
Yes.
Vermont.
Yeah, have there been other nuclear plants that have been involved in decommissioning Holtex?
Yes.
Yes, they dumped at Oyster Creek, as I said before, and they didn't let anyone,
Been the results, anybody monitoring that?
no, not that I know of. They didn't, well, I don't know who was monitoring it, but they didn't tell the
And did they do it
public.
the same way they're proposing here?
I don't know. Yeah. Yes?
Holtec thinks they're George III, but this is Massachusetts.
Hey, Diane, can I make
Yes.
an announcement real
Yep.
quick? We've got some people splitting off.
Yes.
So thank you for everybody coming out tonight. Thank you for the hard work. Ask some questions, move up to the front. We do know what a microphone is, and normally the town gives us one, but it wasn't in the audio box tonight, so I apologize on behalf of the Salties to that for everybody. Diane did a great job yelling at my dense head back here in the back. We've got the room until about 8 o'clock, so if you want to move up to the front and ask questions, please do.